Thursday afternoon, 4 o'clock time for Sports for CLE. Hope you're having a great day. Free agency right around the corner. Monday and Tuesday is when the quote-unquote legalized tampering can occur. That means teams can officially exchange contract numbers with prospective free agents, and then they become official when the league year opens Wednesday at 4 o'clock. Let's take a look at some projected free agent contracts. This from Spotrac. They say Calvin Ridley, $17.5 million, 4 years, $70 million is what they're estimating. Marquise Brown, $14.8 million, 4 years, $59 million. Gabe Davis, $13.6 million. Roughly 4 years, $54.5 million. Curtis Samuel, $11.5 million, 3 years, $34.6 million, and Tyler Boyd, $8.7 million, 3 years, $26.1 million contract. Those are kind of the big names, some attached to the Browns. Let's welcome in Brad Spielberger, Pro Football Focus. Brad, I know you've done quite a bit with free agents and the projections. That seems awfully high. The market for free agent wide, and I know it costs a lot, and it's a premium. I don't think I like any of those guys at those numbers. Am I crazy?
I'll say this as nicely as I can. I think Spotrac is going to be off on all those on the high side, except for Calvin Ridley. I think might still get up there just because now he is the kind of prize wide receiver free agent in the class. But yeah, they're too high on the rest of them. I think, Gabe Davis is interesting. I think, we've obviously, like you said, heard some connections. I know Mary Kay Cabot mentioned him in an article and whatnot, and I think he does make sense. He's a willing blocker. He's a good downfield, pseudo Donovan Peoples-Jones type of player. But, what I heard in Indy was more of a one-year flyer type, $12 million on a one-year flyer type deal.
Yeah, and Samuel's another guy that I think she mentioned in that, and the multi-year. I'm kind of with you. If you're telling me it's $12 million for a year and we see where we go, I can get that. 13.5 at 3 or 4 years. I can't see. Andrew Berry's been pretty good about and people are going to say, what about the Deshaun Watson contract? He's been pretty good about not painting himself into a corner contract-wise.
Oh, for sure, especially in free agency. They pick their spots and don't overspend and understand the market and not chasing maybe some of the higher values, waiting for the second wave and doing well there. The Curtis Samuel one is interesting as well. I think he is a player you can use in a lot of different roles. He's carried the ball in his past. He's been a slot guy. He's been kind of a vertical threat out wide too. Still only 27 years old going into that third contract. Again, though, I think the projection there was 13 or 11.5. Yeah. I have that one $8.5 million per year on a 2-year extension. So, again, it's not nothing, but I think you do, with how good the draft class is, and what we've already learned so far from, Mike Evans' deal coming in at 2 years, $41 million. These receivers get pinched. These are the guys that, unfortunately, because of how good the classes are and then how expensive the top-of-market guys have become, these second- and third-tier receivers are kind of the guys that lose out on the money.
All right, so Andrew Berry, actually, the past couple of years, has traded for a wide receiver. He had Amari Cooper, he had Elijah Moore. These are some wide receivers who could potentially be traded. The contract number there is what they are owed in this upcoming year. A lot of them are in the last year. So Mike Williams, $17 million. He is coming off an ACL, I believe it was in week 3 or 4 last year. So that's a concern, obviously. Brandon Ayuk, 14.1. They've got a lot of mouths to feed in San Francisco. That will be an interesting one. Cortland Sutton. The Broncos are clearing the decks here. They got rid of Wilson. They got rid of a really good safety. Not a good year to be a safety. Their safeties are being plunged away. Sutton's owed $13 million. There's 2 years left. $13 million a year for 2 years. Jerry Jeudy, $12.9 million, is in his final year. T. Higgins is tagged. That means he's going to get at least $21.8 million. There's no way the Bengals are trading him to the Browns. And Deontay Johnson is an interesting one. Reports he's not real happy in Pittsburgh, $7 million, and just 1 year left on his deal. The trade route, does that seem to make more sense? And you referenced Mary Kay Cabot. She's kind of been drawing the parallels with Mike Williams, just played with Deshaun Watson, has been productive, but he's been hurt and he's coming off an ACL.
I think he's going to get cut probably in the next, 48, 72 hours. I don't think he's a trade, or you're going to need to trade for him just because of how difficult the Los Angeles Chargers salary cap situation is. So that one definitely could make a lot of sense. He is that vertical threat again, a good, go up and get it, contested catch receiver. I think, unfortunately, too, he was playing some really good football before that ACL tear in a more diverse role. Some quick hitters, some quick outs and slants and things like that, too, becoming part of his game and running after the catch. So he's intriguing for sure. Judy's the guy that's been on the market for, 2 years in a row now. I think Adam Schefter said there was an offer for a third and a fifth or something like that. Denver probably should have taken that offer. But, yeah, maybe he's available too. And then, look, Brandon Ayuk, you're talking like maybe 2 firsts or at least a first and more. I don't think that's realistic. T. Higgins is not going to happen. And Deontay Johnson, like you said, the AFC North probably not going to give you a good receiver.
You look at Mike Williams, and you think, I'm with you, he's probably going to get cut. What do you think a one-year prove-it deal looks like? Because I know you do figure these things out. If it's Mike Williams, what's a 1 year? Let's get him in. Let's see if he's got some. And keeping in mind he's coming off an ACL, see if he's got some of the magic with Watson left.
So that's the big thing, is that this is my space, but I'm not a doctor. So I would love to know exactly how healthy that ACL is, and that's going to have a huge variable. But I would say, I think you're talking like 1 year, 7-8 mil, and then there's incentives on top of that, of course, tied to how many snaps are they playing, receptions, receiving yards, touchdowns, maybe some team success tied in as well. I think that's kind of where it would end up.
Brad, don't worry. We have you as the Sports4CLE doctor from here on out. So you can play one on our podcast. All right. Let's take a look at this. This is from NFL.com. It's kind of interesting. Notable free agents who could be underpriced and also overpriced on the open market. So underpriced, they go with quarterback Jacoby Brissett, 31-year-old signal caller. It seems like everywhere they go, they love him as a backup. This guy's an interesting name, Dorrance Armstrong. It's a guy from the Cowboys, and doesn't get a lot of snaps. You see 566 pass rush snaps, 16 total sacks over the past 2 years. He's going to be 27. It's kind of interesting. How does a guy like that's productive not get more snaps? Well, Micah Parsons plays that. That's one of the ways. And then Tyler Boyd, we've talked about him. And again, the projection's pretty low. Overpriced, these aren't a surprise. Marquise Brown has not produced with the Cardinals, hasn't produced with Ravens. Probably not completely his fault, but still has not lived up to expectations. Gabe Davis is kind of interesting. People either love Gabe Davis or they're really concerned about him. There doesn't seem to be a whole lot of middle ground. And Chase Young, you can certainly understand why people would be concerned with that. The 49ers didn't work out quite as well as they had hoped. When you look at the underpriced guys, so that's Brissett, Armstrong, Boyd, who intrigues you there? And then we'll do the overpriced, which ones you're more concerned about.
Yeah, Dorrance Armstrong for sure for me. Like you said, he didn't play a ton, but it's because not only Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence, but you also have more rotational pieces like a Dante Fowler. He was a second-round pick on Sam Williams last year as well, and he boxed him out. Armstrong did. So a very good pass rusher. Dan Quinn comes into that team, and he really, clearly bought into what Armstrong had to offer. He's got good bend. He's springy. He's quick off the line. Maybe not the greatest all-around player. There's some Okoronkwo, I suppose, is like a very good pass rusher that's, there's some question marks in the rest of his game, but he's a really, really good player that I like a lot and think, there could be a good value potentially in free agency there.
All right, as far as the overpriced guys, who concerns you more, Brown, Davis, or Chase Young? Which would you be more buyer? And who knows if they're going to be good, but I'm saying when you look at it, if you go, I'd be careful.
Yeah, I'd probably go Chase Young for that one. He actually did have a good Super Bowl, but his playoff run before that was not particularly impressive. And really the whole second half of the season in San Fran, he just could have been better. Could have offered more. Could have been, just more of a value after, they trade a third-round pick for him. You pair him with Nick Bosa and Javon Hargrave and Eric Armstead and all those guys, and he was fine. He just wasn't really, you thought maybe he would take off and take advantage of that. And look, he played with a good platoon in Washington as well. So, look, he's a good player. You see, there were a couple snaps in the Super Bowl against Donovan Smith where he looked like the second overall pick. But I think because of the draft capital, the draft status, if you will, for him, he'll probably get overpaid because those guys just do keep getting more money. And the downside risk is there, no question.
All right, take a look at this tweet, Pro Football Talk, and this has been all over the place lately. Relative to Joe Flacco, Cleveland is definitely the place I would feel best. That's attributed to Joe Flacco. The talk is he is more than open to coming back if he does not get that starting quarterback opportunity. Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski were both asked if bringing Flacco back as Deshaun Watson's backup would be a potential problem in the locker room. The thought being if Watson gets off to a slow start or is having trouble coming back from that injury, the fans would be calling for Flacco based on what he did. Neither Andrew Berry or Kevin Stefanski thought it would be a big deal. What are your thoughts on that? You know how, especially in Cleveland, you know how fans are.
Yeah, it's the thing. It's like it shouldn't be an issue. Like, look, I love Joe Flacco. Deserved comeback player of the year. It was a fun ride. If you're clamoring for him to play, if Watson has a couple poor games in the beginning of the season, he also threw a bunch of picks, and let's not forget the playoff game. What do you have? Multiple pick sixes. So I'm not trying to talk bad about Joe Flacco. They have the fans come after me now too. But the upside and the trying to chase the moon is not there with Joe Flacco. He is a capable backup. He should have been on an NFL roster the entire year, and he proved that, which is cool to see. But you'd hope it's not an issue, but I agree with you. Like, it would be an issue in the locker room. I agree. Fans, look, Joe Flacco's a fun guy to root for and cheer for and push to start when they're frustrated with the starter.
All right, some news coming out about Russell Wilson. Broncos let him go. They are purging salary. Take a look at this. This is from a Steelers beat reporter, and a pretty good one. Steelers interested in signing Russell Wilson, tentatively planning to meet with the former Broncos quarterback before the start of free agency, so that's within the next couple of days. Wilson is interested in joining the Steelers. Just what the division needs, another high-profile quarterback that can probably still play a little. It makes a lot of sense to me. Does Wilson to the Steelers make sense to you?
So he's fascinating because he could take a minimum contract or very close to a minimum contract because he's owed $39 million by Denver, and there's offset language in that money. So that's where it's fascinating. He has fallen off a little bit. His game hasn't aged particularly well because of what he does. A lot of outside of structure, off-script work where it worked when you were 25. It's tougher when you're 35. It doesn't attack the middle of the field all that often. So there are limitations. But is he worth 1 year, $3 million? No question about it. So, yeah, I understand the interest. I think Kenny Pickett has struggled to show a lot through his first 2 seasons. I wouldn't be scared if I'm a Browns fan, but it wouldn't be a great signing for the rest of the AFC North because I do think he'd probably be something of an upgrade at quarterback for them.
All right, before we go to break, who do you think? What I'm looking for here is somebody that you think is going to get a lot of value. So free agency, a signing that you think will be made, and people will look back and go, man, that was a really good signing. Doesn't have to be a top of the end guy, but somebody you think is going to light it up with a new team in free agency.
Yeah, I wonder if he leaves Miami, but I think one that intrigues me is Connor Williams, the center, who tore his ACL in the first half of the season. And obviously, again, we'll circle back to that. I'm not an MD, but I think his market was going to be super, super strong if that does not happen. Top center available, a bunch of teams bidding for his services. He's a former guard from Dallas. He's really, really good at the second level, getting in front of players to make blocks in the backside of runs and do all these different things that were so valuable in Miami. And if he can sign for a cheaper deal, but then gets healthy and is ready pretty quickly, I could just see a scenario where a lot of teams are like, you know what, we should have taken the risk on the medicals because this guy's a really, really good football player.
Brad Spielberger, Pro Football Focus, and I can step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports for CLE, be right back. Stay with us.
Go ahead and pop a clamp on that. Let's take 5. With one of these 5 Lady Luck scratch-offs from the Ohio Lottery, like this new $20 100X with its $1 million grand prize, I want to get my cut of that 76% payout.
So, good news. We're playing the largest family of scratch-offs ever. These Lady Lucks have all the fun and no complications.
We continue talking Browns and free agency with Brad Spielberger from Pro Football Focus. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Yeah, I'm a longtime Browns fan, and we talk about wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver. It seems Joe Flacco didn't have any problem 300-plus yards every game, but no other quarterback can do it. Is the quarterback or is the wide receivers? Do you really need a wide receiver that bad at the expense of others? Thanks.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Brad, I think we were talking about that last segment a little bit. That is kind of the mindset. And again, I get it. Joe Flacco came in, threw for a bunch of yards. I'm kind of with you, though, that the interceptions are a concern. Can he take a pound? The problem is he didn't have to play an entire game and didn't get hit a lot. That's a good thing for a guy that's 39, 40 years old.
For sure, yeah. I definitely don't want the takeaway of my segment to be that I'm anti-Joe Flacco. But I think if quarterbacks didn't feel the pressure to not turn the ball over and were just being gunslingers and taking risks and taking chances, which they certainly should do to a degree, they would be able to throw for that many yards. But he obviously, the downside was there. And even beyond the actual interceptions, there were plenty of dropped interceptions too. So, look, I get it. I hear it. You could hold Deshaun Watson to a higher standard or believe in that excuse less, because it was also not only receivers, but Joe Flacco was also operating behind a patchwork offensive line, particularly a tackle. So, yeah, it's fair to say, all right, clearly you can work with these receivers and David Njoku and everything there. But again, you want to play complementary football, let the good defense be a good defense. All those things is important too.
Yeah, and the offense needs to, and again, I get it. There were big splash plays. There needs to be more chunk plays, and they need to be more explosive offensively, even if it's whomever's the quarterback. All right, you wrote an article, top landing spots for free agent edge rushers. So 42 on the list, and you had Zadarius Smith with the Browns, potential landing spots, Lions and Texans. Take us through kind of your thoughts through that and what you think that might look like for Zadarius Smith with either the Lions or the Titans or the Browns. What's the contract look like in your mind?
Yeah, so it was the intention of the article was no one returned to their original team. So I'm not saying I actually think he's going to be a Cleveland Brown again. But I have met 2 years, $24 million is the projected contract I have for Zadarius, which I think is a good deal for both parties. We've talked before. I think last year he was better than his production from a sack standpoint. He still is a menace as a pass rusher. He can line up as an outside linebacker. He can line up as a, 3-tech on the interior, 5-technique, defensive end, all sorts of different things that he can do. So Detroit needs more pass rush. Everyone talks about the corners in the secondary, and I get that. But they also struggled outside of Aiden Hutchinson and Aleem McNeil on that defensive line. They really need more. And they started using Aiden Hutchinson and John Kaminsky as on passing downs. They would kick inside and do different things. So I think they would deploy him in a similar fashion, and it would be fun to see. And then, yeah, Houston, I think they're going to lose Jonathan Grenard. I think he's going to get a big old contract from somebody else. So that was kind of the thought process there. Get Will Anderson, a running mate, a veteran, and Zadarius Smith to play with.
All right. So, again, these were guys that wouldn't go back to their original team. You did have the Browns signing Denico Autry. You had the Browns and Giants as the landing spot. It's kind of interesting because you can draw the parallel. Autry did play for a Jim Schwartz-led, he was a senior defensive analyst with the Titans or something along those lines. But there is a connection there.
And it's meaningful, too, because you can line up. Autry's always been a good player, but the spike of the last couple of years when he became a truly game-wrecking force for that defensive line was when Jim Schwartz got there, or right around the same time. So, and he is super diverse as well. You can line him up all over. He's as strong as any defensive lineman in the NFL. Yeah, he's in his mid 30s, but he's still playing at a very, very high level. I love that thought. I think even with Zadarius, I kind of like that connection still.
All right, same thing. Landing spots for top defensive tackles, and keep in mind again the exercise of the article is they can't go back to their initial team. So you had Maurice Hurst, landing spot Bengals, Lions, and then you had Shelby Harris, landing spot Ravens and Jets. Let's ask you the contract you think those two get. Are those two guys, those are older guys. Are they still on one-year deals, and what do you think they look like as well?
Yeah, I think those are going to be a bunch of one-year deals. Obviously, again, Hurst and Harris could be back. I think Hurst in particular had a great season. Unfortunately got hurt, but, I think we'll be back in the fold. So, that is one that's exciting for Cleveland if he can stay healthy. We saw a lot last year in all facets of football, but the Bengals do need some help on the interior. They might lose DJ Reader, so I like that connection there. Shelby Harris is interesting. Him and Quentin Jefferson and some of those veteran, three technique interior pass rush types. They kind of bounce around on 1-year deals, and maybe he goes elsewhere, but maybe Quentin Jefferson or something comes into Cleveland. So yeah, I mean these are all kind of these 1-year flyer types, but can have meaningful production in a specific 400, 500 snap type role.
All right. In that same article, you had the Browns getting Kevin Givens. Bears and Browns were potential landing spots. So I say the Browns getting, but they're one of the guys you could see do that. What would Givens bring?
Givens was interesting where he kind of boxed out Javon Kinlaw in San Fran last year and earned more and more snaps. And again, he's a guy that, San Fran has developed all of these kind of rotational defensive linemen, but another guy who, really does well in a committee of very good players. He can get upfield in a hurry. He is gap sound. He's a smart football player. Again, heavy-handed and can kind of bull rush some guards and centers on the interior. He's an interesting rotational piece as well.
All right. Before we go to break, so both Christian Wilkins and Chris Jones did not get tagged. They will be at least on the free agent market. They may go back to their initial teams. Where do you think they end up, and how much do they get paid?
Yeah, so, I mean, Christian Wilkins, I think, is the one that's going to leave, and I think it's going to be a monster deal. I think you're talking 4 years, $100 million potentially. Houston's a team that I think is very, very interesting here. I've mentioned they're going to lose some pieces. Jonathan Grenard, Sheldon Rankins on the interior, I think, also will leave, and I think they are a very intriguing landing spot. Pair him with Will Anderson. He's a force on the interior. Chris Jones, I think, goes back to Kansas City. I know he tweeted out something cryptic about an hour ago. I know Mike Garafolo on NFL Network was talking about the Las Vegas Raiders as a potential spot, but I think Kansas City brings him back, and his deal is going to be even bigger. I have it at 4 years, 120. The fourth year is probably going to be a bit of an inflated. The real value is probably $27, $28 million a year, but I think he will slot in below Aaron Donald and above everybody else.
Brad Spielberger, Pro Football Focus, and I'm going to step aside, take one more time out. Other side of the break, we'll talk some more free agency, a little bit of the guys that grabbed some attention at the Combine. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns and free agency with Brad Spielberger from Pro Football Focus. So, Brad, we're going through another one of your articles. Again, you can go to Pro Football Focus and see a lot of what we're talking about here. Potential landing spots for free agent linebackers. You had Jordan Hicks landing spots, potentially the Browns and the Broncos. What would Hicks bring to the Browns linebacking core, do you think?
Yeah, really sound veteran off-ball linebacker that was also playing great ball last year before an injury. He played for Jim Schwartz back in Philly, so a while ago now. But he's just a smart, savvy football player. He's a pretty good player in coverage, even still for his age. He does have a physicality still and can come up and thump in the run game. But the big thing with him is just good spatial awareness, a savvy veteran, knows how to kind of sit down in zones and take away throwing lanes for quarterbacks. I think would help a lot of younger players across this defense kind of just know where to be and know how to make plays. And him and Jock would be a fun combo at linebacker.
All right. Same article. And again, the point of these articles were that players were going to leave their team and go to different ones. So you had Sione Takitaki with the Cardinals and Saints, Anthony Walker, Chiefs and Buccaneers potentially. Of those two, do you think one is more likely to return to the Browns than the other?
Interesting. I think they're probably interested in both. I thought Takitaki really stepped up and played good football to close out last season. And obviously he's been there for a while. But Walker, obviously, you're showing clips of him talking at press conferences to me a bunch, and obviously as a vocal, leader of this team. So they got to do something. They got to bring some backers back into the fold. I don't get a read any is more likely than the other. I think similar markets, and they're both just solid, players at a position the team doesn't try to spend a whole lot at.
Yeah, and Taki's a little bit younger, so we'll see. The thing that impressed me about Taki is they moved him around a little bit. He played off ball, he played middle, and it seemed like wherever they played, he showed up on Sundays.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. He was moved all over, even year to year. There was some like coming down and being a Sam and being on the strong side. Then you saw more like weak side coverage ability from him last year. He's a fun piece. And you're right. He is younger. I guess they both had some injuries, but Walker's probably more severe. So, yeah, it'd be fun to see Taki back in Cleveland. I think he's a good fit in this defense.
All right. This from PFF as well. Perfect free agent match for all 32 NFL teams. Browns and linebacker Azeez Al-Shaair would offer physical presence at linebacker. The Browns currently don't have. Linebackers 27th run grade defense last season, could improve that room as a specialist. What do you see with him that might work out for the Browns, and what kind of makes him jump out a little bit?
So I do love Azeez Al-Shaair. I did not write this article. I know it's a free agency article, but and I think it's maybe a little bit rich for what they're trying to do. I think he gets around $7 million a year, but he is very jock-like to me too. He is so much fun coming forward. He plays with his hair is on fire. He explodes through gaps or sheds blocks at the line, and is just a really, really good run defender, sideline to sideline. I think there is some redundancy there with Jock, but he's a fun football player.
All right, this from the Bleacher Report. Ideal landing spots for the Combine stars. Florida State defensive tackle Braden Fisk. They have the ideal landing spots, 49ers, Browns, Bengals. Fisk did well for himself. First in his position in the 40, 4.78, vertical, 33.5, broad jump, 9 feet, 9 inches. Yeah, the quickness and the agility were what, when he's moving back, it's almost like you could drop him in coverage. When you watched him at the Combine, I was like, this is a defensive tackle?
Yeah, right. I mean, he tested off the charts. And his tape at FSU, too, is a guy that plays with a ton of effort on every single snap, plays through the whistle. I'm not going to say he looks like a bad athlete on his tape, but I just didn't think he would test off the charts like this. I think he'd be a fun chess piece for Jim Schwartz, no question, because, the effort and intensity is already there, and now we know he's a special athlete, too. So he was probably the biggest winner of the entire week in Indy. I don't think he's going to be a first-round pick, but I think he went from, late second, early third to now probably a top 50 prospect.
Yeah, which kind of moves him right out of that range where the Browns will be picking late in the second round. Who are some other guys that you thought really stood out at the Combine, some of the Combine winners?
Yeah, I think Theo Johnson at Penn State, who also tested off the charts. And there was a little bit of production from him last year, but not a great passing game. He was a good run blocker. He's big, and he does move pretty well. He's fairly fluid in the open field. We just didn't get to see a lot of that, which, of course, happens. The Iowa tight ends always come out, and they have 8 catches in their college career, and then they become George Kittle and Sam Laporta. So, it's a very hard thing to project, but the testing there was off the charts. And then this is an obvious one, but Xavier Worthy, the Texas wide receiver that broke the Combine record in the 40 at 4.21. To me, he was a guy who was probably not going to go in the first round, probably a top 40 pick. And now I just think some team's going to sit there and be like, speed kills. We got to just take him. And now I think that late first, all those teams that need receiver, Kansas City or, whoever in that late range, maybe just pulls the trigger.
Yeah, think about John Ross, who's 40 time he broke. I think he went in the top 10. I think he went 9 or 10 to the Giants the year he came out. Let me ask you this. With Worthy, for whatever reason, I saw a lot of Texas football. He looks more like a football guy that's playing track than a track guy that crossed over to football. When I look at him, and I'm probably comparing him to Anthony Schwartz, who the Browns drafted, and I'm like, where was this guy in Anthony Schwartz is kind of the response that I had.
You see a better understanding of how to manipulate leverage and erase angles for defenders, and I think just navigate a football field. Being fast helps, but there's also more nuance to it, and I would agree. I think you see Worthy, good stop and start ability, avoiding contact, and like I said, just knowing how to use the full field to his advantage. I would agree with that.
Brad Spielberger, Pro Football Focus. Appreciate the time and the insight. I know you're busy, but I appreciate you taking some time with us. Thanks very much.
course. Thank you, guys.
Brad Spielberger, make sure you check him out. Always really good stuff. Free agency, he'll be all over it. He'll also have stuff leading up to the draft as well. Check him out. Brad Spielberger, Pro Football Focus. We're going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, Jack Duffin from the Orange and Brown Report. Sports4CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
Here comes the rush.
All right, everybody, let's take 5. With one of these 5 Lady Luck scratch-offs from the Ohio Lottery.
Like the $10 Lady Luck 50X. It's got prizes all the way up to 500 grand, so you could really clean up.
The Lady Luck family of scratch-offs is the Ohio Lottery's first ever, with 5 price points from $1 to 20. They're an easy way to cook up some fun.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation. I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams. I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns as we get closer to legalized tampering at Monday and Tuesday, and then the start of the league year Wednesday at 4 o'clock. This tweet from Jack Duffin, Orange and Brown Report. Don't be shocked if we don't see Watson and several other Browns contract restructured until near week 1. Better for them to negotiate, being the Browns, with nothing on their cap space as opposed to having $70 million before talking to agents. Easy to restructure as go. Just the Nick Chubb deal that needs to be negotiated. Let's welcome in Jack Duffin from the Orange and Brown Report. Jack, appreciate the time. So take us through kind of that thought process and what you meant by that. And then the other question is, how much cap space can the Browns create enough cap space to do what they want to do in free agency?
Yeah, so in terms of sort of a restructure, and a restructure isn't a pay cut, it's not changing money, it's accounting. The player's going to get paid probably on the same dates. Nothing changes really from the player's perspective. It's just the team call it a signing bonus rather than base salary. And so what that's going to mean is nothing for a player, but the team effectively just presses a button, sends off to the league, we're going to pay it this way, and then that space magically appears on the salary cap. So it's not one where they need to do this stuff ages in advance. There's language in the contracts allowing them just to restructure as they will. The two players that have slightly different things going on, Amari Cooper's deal was actually done by the Dallas Cowboys, so we don't know if the Browns added that language when they did the previous restructure. And then Nick Chubb's likely to end up being forced into taking a pay cut, similar to what we've seen for Von Miller, because if Nick Chubb was a free agent today, he wouldn't be looking at $12.2 million, because naturally coming off an injury, age, you'd be taking a much smaller deal, probably around $4 to $6 million, I think would be realistic. So there's going to be a negotiation there where he'll probably take a pay cut to maybe $6 million and then maybe gets $6.2 million back in incentives that he can earn. Will he earn all of those incentives? Probably not, but it's allowing for that balance of the two.
Yeah, so you think the Browns can basically create as much cap space as they need to make the moves they want to make?
Yeah, so they can certainly go out and create loads. They won't go and spend everything. So if we look at sort of what they've done over previous years, it's about 121% of the salary cap is what they go and spend in cash. So how much is directly paid to the players, So we're looking at around 41 million net they've got to go out and spend. But there's balance that. If they go out and sign a guy for, say they sign Corey Bjorkquist for $2.5 million, well, almost that's going to take one player off the salary cap at 0.8 million. So it's like 1.7 net there. So there's money to go out and play. There's not money to go out and do stupid big stuff, but I'm sure we'll touch on that shortly.
All right, let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey guys, I really like the idea of going after defensive tackle Christian Wilkins in free agency. He appears to be a perfect fit. However, he could become cost prohibitive and command $25 million plus a year at his price tag. Instead, could that money be used to acquire two good players for the D-line instead, like defensive end and tackle, both becoming starters? For example, picking up Bryce Huff on the edge and defensive tackle Grover Stewart, or another combination might be Chase Young and Tier Tart. More bodies might be better than relying on one player. We had our share of injuries last year. This would provide more currency and depth. Go Browns!
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. So, Jack, I play that with you because of your tweet. So take a look. Jack tweeted this out. So Christian Wilkins, you see 2023. These are pressure rates among defensive tackles. 10%, 5.2, 8.1. It's pretty good. Shelby Harris, 8.7, 8.3, 9.0. And you draw the comparison. Is Wilkins $22 million a year better? And then you play that off against Chris Jones, who's also out there, 4.4, 13.1, 14.2. So relative to the callers, those are the questions that Andrew Berry has to answer, correct?
It's a voice after my own heart with that sort of logic, because I'm very much the mindfulness that Christian Wilkins is going to cost 25 mil. And for that same amount of snaps, and yeah, he will play 80% of snaps, whereas a Maurice Hurst, a Shelby Harris will only play 40%. But if I can spend 5 million and get those 80% of snaps in the form of Maurice Hurst and Shelby Harris, and it's cost me 5 million rather than one Christian Wilkins at 25 million, why have I just wasted 20 million? Because I'm not getting any more pressure on the quarterback. What has I genuinely achieved? So for me, it's just a horrendous investment. I think if you were spending 25 million and you're getting Chris Jones level, now we're talking about something significantly better. We're saying, hey, we're not just getting 10% that we might get with a Wilkins, a Harris, a Hurst. We're talking about 14%. And that's a jump in the really right direction you want to go, where you can talk about it's a real difference maker. I think Christian Wilkins is ridiculously overhyped. I think he's probably about an 18 million a year player. He's going to get paid 25 million, likely because of free agency. So buyer beware for him. I would much rather go after Harris, Hurst, and then you can go spend 20 million wherever else you want on the roster. I would much rather add sort of 6-7 quality players than you spend all your off-season budget on Christian Wilkins, and then you're regretting it because you're not seeing any additional pressure than what you were getting a year ago.
All right, this one from the Bleach Report, top free agency values at each position. So running back, they go with A.J. Dillon. Did not have a good year with the Packers 2023, 613 rush yards. Fewest since his rookie season, 3.4 yards a carry, career low, scored just 2 touchdowns. 25-year-old former second-round pick who's averaged over 4 yards carry in each of his first 3 seasons. Probably not going to get a lot of money because no running back will. Wide receiver, Tyler Boyd. Aren't many wideouts the right side of 30 who become available in free agency who possess 1,000-yard upside season. Will likely sign for less than $10 million a season. That would be Boyd. And then this guy's name keeps popping up a little bit. Dorrance Armstrong. Might be a value, but he isn't going to be cheap. A contract averaging north of $10 million a season, real possibility. Increasing his role. Armstrong absolutely capable of posting a 10-sack season. Is he the kind of younger guy that you could see added to that defensive end rotation, do you think? He's a guy, again, that he's stuck behind Lawrence and Parson in Dallas and still able to get decent amount of sacks.
Yeah, if I'm looking at sort of 10 million on Dorrance, or I'm looking at 12 million on Zadarius Smith, I'm taking Zadarius Smith all day long. He gets more pressure on the quarterback. We know he works in Cleveland, and it's always a risk. Anytime you sign another player's free agent, will they do exactly what they've done there in another team? Obviously, it's easier with an edge. There's less chemistry that you need compared to a wide receiver, O-line play, bits like that. But for me, I'm completely content with Zadarius Smith. I'd bring him back. It would probably be painted as a 2-year deal, but it'd be a 1 year with a team option as the second. And that way, if suddenly Wright takes a step forward, Isaiah McGuire takes a step forward, you might be able to just drop Smith off next offseason, and then you're going in a different position of having lots of young, exciting talent coming through. And maybe you go and spend crazy money on defensive tackle in a year's time or somewhere else on the roster. But I would say Zadarius Smith ticks all the boxes they need. For me, that's a really smart move to bring him back.
What about a free agent running back? Do you think they do that at the lower end? Zach Moss, those kind of guys.
Yeah, I think $4 million in your sort of Zach Moss, your AJ Dillon, Devin Singletary's one that really stands out to me. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think it will give us an indication on where's Nick Chubb trending, because if they go out and they want to spend sort of $6.5 million, $7 million on a Tony Pollard, on a Austin Eckler, it's probably not trending in a very good direction for Nick Chubb. Whereas if they're going for that cheaper guy and they're just going, Zach Moss or Devin Singletary, we're probably going to feel more optimistic about Nick Chubb. So that for me is going to be a strong indication of what is his timeline looking for. Is it nearer the start of the season, or is it nearer November, December?
Jack Duffin from the Orange and Brown Report and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we'll talk wide receiver, free agents, trade acquisition, that and more with Jack Duffin from the Orange and Brown Report. Stay with us on Sports4CLE. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We continue talking Browns free agency and salary cap with Jack Duffin from the Orange and Brown Report. Jack tweeted this out. Great look at the free agent wide receiver names. Great looking one, but best ones have been tagged or extended. Most teams have wide receiver needs. Not many targets for a prove-it free agent. You got Cooper and Njoku, Moore, Tillman, and Bell. Better quarterbacks, like a wide receiver needing Mahomes, can elevate your value. You take that into account, and I'm kind of with you, Jack. It seems like trade might be the best route. And some of the projections for some of those free agent wide receivers, they seem a little on the high side.
Team wants 3 good wide receivers, and there's just not enough in the league to provide 100 great wide receivers for people to go after. So it's one where they're always going to get overpaid. And whenever you're looking at free agency, it should never be about fixing a problem. They're sticking plasters, and you need to really find it via the draft. Especially at those premium positions, you can find a serviceable defensive tackle. You can find serviceable at other spots. So running back as an example, safety. You can stick players in linebacker, there's always loads. So you don't need to panic, you don't need to draft those positions high. But wide receiver, they need to go and invest high. And it winds me up that people always like, Andrew Berry's got the secret to drafting cornerbacks, and the Bengals have got the secret to drafting wide receivers. No, the difference is, if you look at sort of the top 5 pick, the first round pick, the sort of high in the sort of third, end of the second, well, that's where Higgins, Tyler Boyd, Jamar Chase came from. It's where Denzel Ward came from. It's where Greg Newsome came from. It's where Martin Emerson came from. If you spend assets, top 50 picks, addressing the wide receiver room, you'll fix it. If you start spending picks in the 90 to 100 range, don't expect that to be the solution. You'll get okay guys, but you're not going to get game breakers. You might get the odd one once every so often. Guy in the Lions was drafted late. Puka Nacua for the Rams. They're exceptions to the rule. The vast majority of wide receivers selected in that 90 to 150 range. They're not great. So they need to pick high, and that's got to be done through the draft. Find a sticking plaster. But if you're looking at the top 3 names at wide receiver, why would they come to Cleveland on a 1-year prove-it deal when you can go to the Kansas City Chiefs and you're going to play with Patrick Mahomes in a Super Bowl? It's a pretty easy choice of where you would land.
Yeah, that's absolutely fair. All right, so we've come to the kind of agreement. Trade is an idea, and they have traded for Elijah Moore as well as Amari Cooper the last couple of years. All right, along those lines, a name that keeps coming up, Mike Williams. Mary Kay Cabot kind of mentioned him. He has played with Deshaun Watson at Clemson. So here's a look at him: 82 catches, 1,144 yards, 5 touchdowns. That's his last 16 games. It's important to note he tore his ACL. I believe it was week 3 or week 4 last year. So he's coming off a torn ACL. 8th most contested catches, 20 yards more. He's missed 18 games the last year. Does have a high cap hit. Well, it's $17 million. We were talking to Brad Spielberger. He thinks he might be a cap casualty because of what's going on with the Chargers. Is Williams a guy that you take a flyer on if you're the Browns?
Yeah, when you see those tweets where they take that if he was healthy for the last 16 games, the old Madden will turn injuries off and everything will be fine. And you've got to take it with a pinch of salt. So I think it's one, he's going to cost $20 million. So that's his cash this year. And if you're ever wondering what a player's going to cost, if you go to Over the Cap, really good tool, phenomenal, the best stuff out there for salary cap purposes. The history tab, on there you've got the year-by-year cash breakdown. It's what I always use. I'm on there every day, and that will tell you what you're trading for. So if you traded for him, it's going to cost you $20 million, which is why I think Brad's right. The cut makes the most sense. So he's then into free agency, and it might be one where actually they do a deal with him and say, hey, we'll give you $10 million guaranteed and we'll let you earn the incentives back up, as we might potentially do with Chubb. But if he's going to be, say it's $8 million, $3 to $4 million of incentives, that's a deal I'd certainly do. I wouldn't be trading for him at $20 million. I think that's just too rich for what he's going to provide. And it's a case of seeing. But if you were going in the trade market, I'm looking for more depth piece. I'm not looking to give up pick 54. That needs to be the long-term answer where you're drafting a 8 to 10 year wide receiver for the team. That's not someone I'm giving up assets for, hey, have we got them for a year or two? Even Jerry Jeudy, if we're talking about, hey, it's the 3rd or 4th round pick and maybe we go back a couple of rounds and that's the package there with Jeudy, or if a particular player goes the other way, maybe they want Greg Newsome, probably wouldn't with Patrick Surtain already. But if they find someone they really want, happy to look at that as sort of a deal. But I don't want to give up pick 54. We have to draft the answer. Trading for it will help out for 1-2 years is not the long term. Yeah,
the other guy in Denver as well, Courtland Sutton. So he has 2 years left on his deal. It's $13 million per. Is that a guy that? And again, I'm with you. 2nd, 3rd. I'm talking 4th or 5th. And again, the Broncos they cut Wilson, they cut Simmons. They're looking to get rid of some salary as well.
It's certainly the potential. And Andrew Berry and the team in the building will be calling everyone. So they do a level of due diligence unlike any other team in the NFL. So it was last offseason, I want to say, Thomas Dimitrov, former GM of the Atlanta Falcons, was talking, and he was explaining how the Cleveland Browns work. and they have a unit within the building that they're calling all these teams, they're calling all these agents because they want to find out what the price is for all sorts of guys. Because information's power, knowing what the position market was. If we go back to when Cam Newton was a free agent and ended up signing with the Patriots, he said the only other team he spoke to and had engagement with was the Browns on potentially coming in. And that's after they had got Baker, they'd brought in Case Keenum. They were still calling round and going, hey, what's it going to cost? Because they want to know that information. So they will have a really good idea of what every position market is, what's going on. And then that just allows them to make smarter decisions. So they'll be aware. I don't know if they'll pull the trigger, but pick swaps are usually the best way to go. You don't want to be giving up picks, but if you could go, hey, it's our third rounder, you give us back the player and a fifth, or maybe it is Greg Newsom. For some reason, they're really desperate to add another corner, could definitely be a route. It's just finding out what do they want, and maybe it's another team and getting that deal done. But I'm not swinging big. The Ayuk, stuff like that, I'm not giving up our first for the next 2 years into the future. That stuff just can't be on the table for Cleveland Browns.
All right, this is another tweet from you, and it's really interesting. So the question is, what do the Browns do at linebacker this year? So you take a look. Andrew Berry has spent $7.5 million in average cost of the position for 4 years. Everybody expects Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah to get extended, 3 years, $30 million possible. It's a massive increase at linebacker. So you draw the line there and you say, you know, anybody else, they're probably looking at minimum to $2.5 million. Linebacker is as you pointed out, they historically don't spend there. They're going to spend on Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. And so because of that, basically everybody else has to be minimum to $2.5 million. Is that basically the way to read that?
Yeah, so what happens every time there's a former Ohio State Buckeye gets cut? My mentions on Twitter blow up with, like, are we going to sign him? And obviously the latest one's Brooks at linebacker. So that was basically what that tweet was related to, because everyone's like, are we going to sign him? And it was like, well, if he wants to sign for like $2 million, yes. Is he going to sign for $2 million? No. And it's just setting that expectations, because Andrew Berry's not spent on linebacker, which is really similar to what Jim Schwartz has done in the past. It's similar to what the Eagles have done in the past, because they prefer to keep the money in the defensive line. And if you're spending more on linebacker, so say you do give JOK $10 million a year, that budget needs to be cut from somewhere else. Lots of people go, oh, you just pay JOK. And it's like, that's great. Where are you cutting? Are we taking that money away from a defensive tackle? Are we taking that money away from edge 2 and sort of the Zadarius Smith budget? It's almost moving pieces around a board. You don't just magically appear 10 million. You're having to take that out of the position room, especially when you've never really paid anything at linebacker. So it's an important thing to sort of understand when you're saying, pay this guy, well, whose money are you taking to give that to that person? So I don't expect much else. And you could easily get Taki back on a 4-year qualifying deal, so he'll get paid about 2.8, but they'll only account for like 1.4 on the salary cap. You're allowed to do it with one sort of player a year. There's one set amount of money you can sort of. It's not the same way as a signing bonus, but it's cap manipulation to help keep vets around. And then they could bring back Walker on the cheap too.
Jack Duffin from the Orange and Brown Report. Now I'm going to step aside, take one more time out. Other side break. We continue talking Browns and salary cap, free agency as well. Sports4CLE. Be right back. Stay with us.
All right, everybody. Let's take 5. With one of these 5 Lady Luck scratch-offs from the Ohio Lottery.
Like the $5 25X. It's a nice way to nab up to 150 grand.
The Lady Luck family of scratch-offs is the Ohio Lottery's first ever, with 5 price points from $1 to 20. They're an easy way to break into some fun.
We continue talking Browns with Jack Duffin from the Orange and Brown Report. So, Jack, again, I'm curious about this. Again, Jack does a lot of work, and it's really good work relative to the Browns salary cap. Follow him on Twitter. Make sure you get him on the Orange and Brown Report. Take a look at this tweet. Browns players with guarantees 2025. Watson, Delpit, and Denzel Ward. And you see the number there. The thing that underneath it is Andrew Berry has lots of flexibility to work with next year. Should be a very fun offseason. Take us through that and how important that is.
Yeah, so looking at sort of cash budgets and how much they're going to pay a player, my projection at the moment is there's 41 million set aside for this year that they can go out and pay guys, and that's just continuing their model and how they've worked the last 3 years. And they can create a bit more. Say they cut a guy like Wyatt Teller, or they do a deal with Nick Chubb to take a pay cut. That would add more cash to their budget. If we look forward to next year, so 41 million this year, 106 million off the top of my head is sort of what I'm budgeting them at. And that's working on a 275 million a year salary cap for next season. We still haven't heard that official number for 2025 yet. But then they can go and create loads of money. So they might get rid of Conklin in a year's time. Well, that's another 15 million into your budget. They can get rid of a handful of other guys. Thornhill, 7 million, they might move off of him. We could easily be talking about 150 million to play with. And that's going to be crazy. It's going to be fun. Obviously, it's because a guy like Nick Chubb's out of contract, a guy like Amari Cooper's out of contract. But there is lots of different directions that they can go. This off-season is very much... It's not going to be as radical as last year where there's lots of money going in. It's going to be more continuity, whereas next off-season, everyone's up. There's 3 guys with guarantees. Obviously, we'll add some more. If JOK gets extended, he'll go into that list of guarantees next year. But Andrew Berry has a lot of freedom to play in a year's time. Myles Garrett's going to be asking for a big extension in a year's time. It's going to be a more fun off-season. That's what I'll say. This off-season might be a bit more chilled. Lots of quality additions, but I don't think you're going to see the big splashes. Maybe JOK's at 10 million. Maybe another guy gets Zadarius Smith in that range, whereas it might be a sort of 2-3 guys in the 5 to 10 million range, and then just some smaller, cheap pieces that Shelby Harris that fill out a roster and give you that quality. And that was quality that drove us to the playoffs, because the Browns had guys that they could just keep stepping up and filling in the gaps when guys got injured. That's what really made a difference in this last year. It wasn't the superstars, it was the guys at the bottom of the roster who just allowed continuity to flow when guys got hurt.
Yeah, absolutely. They overcame so many injuries. All right, before I let you go, we saw the Bills and the Broncos dump a lot of salary. They had to cut some players to free up money. How do Andrew Berry and the Browns avoid having to do a similar thing? Is it something that they have planned and you kind of see the footprint and there isn't one of these big things in the offing relative to the Browns' salaries?
They keep enjoying the bank of Jimmy Haslam, and that is the key thing. Lots of people might not like Jimmy Haslam, but the one thing you can say about Jimmy Haslam, he has given a ridiculous sum of money to this team in the last few years. They have outspending league average by 50 million a year. When we're talking about that being, there's right around the top at 300 million. So 50 million a year when you talk about NFL numbers seems small. But if we're talking the middle's 250 million, they're at the top of it at 300 million roughly. That is a significant chunk of change. And Jimmy Haslam is throwing money at Andrew Berry. Andrew Berry's having to be smart and managing this. And it's why they won't go out and do anything stupid this year, because then this model that is 100% sustainable gets really dangerous. Whereas if they go out and spend 41 million this year, they can go out and blow 150 million maybe in a year's time. That stays sustainable. But Jimmy Haslam is the number one reason why this can happen, because there's lots of smart GMs around the league that could do what Andrew Berry does. Having an owner that's actually going to go, I'll give you 50 million more than league average, that's rare.
And so, again, Browns are spending significantly more than the league average, and that's what's allowing them to sustain what they are doing relative to the contracts.
Very few teams in the league cross 10 players that are earning 10 plus million a year. It wouldn't surprise me if the Browns are at 15 this year. So that is the insane level of how it is. There's lots of teams that won't get to double digits. The Browns might be at 14, 15. So thank you, Jimmy Haslam. Keep spending the money. We're relying on a little bit of luck because that's what got you to the playoffs. If we had a league average roster last year and you stripped 50 million worth of investment out of it, we're nowhere near the playoffs. We're probably nearer the first overall pick, and then we wouldn't have had it. It'd have been a disaster, but we'd have been picking in the top 10. The amount of money that Jimmy is throwing at this is what is allowing it to become a success. Andrew Berry's great. Andrew Berry isn't the same GM without that massive additional payroll.
Jack Duffin, Orange and Brown Report, as always. Great stuff. Thank you so much for the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Jack.
Thanks a lot.
Jack Duffin, make sure you follow him on Twitter. Read him in the Orange and Brown Report. He is great with free agency, even better with the salary cap, and we appreciate his time and insight. It's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.